You saw, and you can never go back. Have you ever wished to be someone who sees everything, who reads between every line, catches every micro-expression, detects every manipulation before it forms? Someone immune to deception, untouchable by lies, impossible to fool. And then it happened. Your perception sharpened beyond repair. Now you see the emptiness behind forced smiles, the calculation inside compliments, the desperation masquerading as confidence. You watch conversations and recognize the scripts people recite without knowing they're performing. You sense the panic underneath their composure, the rage beneath their politeness, the void they're frantically trying to fill with noise. Your awareness has been weaponized against your own peace. You've developed what Shi Heng identified as the curse of the awake, when consciousness becomes so penetrating that ignorance is no longer an option. You cannot unsee the patterns, cannot pretend the theater is real, cannot participate in conversations that feel like elaborate lies everyone agreed to believe. The social world has become transparent and unbearably hollow. Every interaction now carries the weight of what's actually happening beneath the surface. Every smile feels like a performance. Every gesture seems calculated. Every word carries the echo of what's being left unsaid. There's no celebration when you cross this threshold. No reward for piercing through the veil. Just this, a silence that follows you everywhere, a weight no one else carries. The exhausting burden of being awake while everyone else sleeps. You've lost the luxury of surface-level living, lost the permission to believe what's convenient, lost the fantasy that most human interaction is genuine. You've been colonized by truth, and truth is not kind. But here's what you need to understand. Your nervous system has been hijacked by clarity, and something profound shifts in the social field around you. Others sense you see more, and that terrifies them. If this content is making sense to you, click the subscribe button and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for your support. They flinch when you don't react to jokes that aren't funny. Recoil when your silence exposes what their words are trying to hide. Your presence becomes a threat, not because you speak, but because you don't need to. Your eyes have been sharpened into instruments that cut through performance without permission. You've become what most people fear, a mirror that reflects without flattery. They want you to nod along, laugh on cue, validate their illusions. But something in your system has been rewired. The script no longer computes. The performance feels insulting to something deep within you that has awakened and refuses to go back to sleep. Shi Heng recognized this phenomenon precisely. When awareness becomes too acute, you develop what he called the observer's curse. You see the machinery of human deception operating in real time. The unconscious patterns, the automated responses, the desperate theater that most mistake for authentic living. Your presence disrupts the collective agreement to pretend everything is fine. You sit in conversations and feel the weight of everything unspoken, sense the desperation behind forced enthusiasm. Notice how people perform intimacy while avoiding actual connection. You watch them chase validation while running from themselves. Every gathering becomes an exercise in watching people avoid their own depths. Every smile carries the echo of what's being suppressed. Every laugh sounds hollow because you can hear the pain it's trying to cover. They don't thank you for seeing. They don't appreciate your insight. They avoid you because your presence forces them to confront what they're desperately trying to ignore, themselves. And this creates something even more disorienting. Your heightened perception doesn't elevate you, it exiles you. You've been transformed from participant to witness, from actor to observer. You're physically present but psychologically displaced, occupying a space between worlds that few can comprehend. People laugh. You hear the desperation. They connect. You detect the hunger. They perform intimacy. You sense the manipulation beneath. Your awareness has outgrown the collective agreement to pretend otherwise. When you try to share what you see, you become the problem. The negative one, the overthinker, the one who ruins the mood. They don't want your clarity. They want your complicity in their comfortable delusions. Your system begins rejecting theatrical interaction the way a body rejects poison. Extended exposure to false intimacy creates a physical ache. Your soul develops what Shi Heng called an allergy to performance, an inability to tolerate simulated connection. You don't choose isolation. You choose protection from environments that feel like psychological assault. The more acute your perception becomes, the less you can normalize what others accept without question. The desperate need for constant validation, the compulsive avoidance of silence, the way people perform connection while running from authentic encounter. Your heightened awareness has made you incompatible with the social theater that most mistake for living. Every interaction demands that you participate in scripts that insult your intelligence. You haven't become difficult, you've become discerning. Your system has developed sensitivity to what's artificial, and this sensitivity reveals something that spiritual culture doesn't want you to know. There's a lie that understanding brings peace, that once you see clearly, the pain dissolves into wisdom. You've discovered the brutal reality. Understanding doesn't relieve suffering, it weaponizes it. Now you know exactly why they hurt you. You see the precise mechanisms of their manipulation. You understand the childhood programming that drives their cruelty, their emotional unavailability, their systematic sabotage of anything real. And this knowledge doesn't heal you, it devastates you, because it confirms what your nervous system always suspected. They knew what they were doing, and they chose to do it anyway. Shi Heng understood this psychological violence with surgical precision. You are not suffering because you see, he observed. You are already being destroyed by their unconsciousness. Now you finally understand the machinery of that destruction. Understanding the machinery doesn't stop it from operating. You see the childhood wounds that created their patterns, the generational trauma they're unconsciously perpetuating, the defense mechanisms they've mistaken for personality. You see it all with devastating clarity, but you cannot change it, cannot fix it, cannot love them into consciousness. You can only witness the systematic way they avoid themselves while projecting that avoidance onto everyone around them. Wisdom is not relief, it's exposure. Like developing the ability to see radiation, the knowledge doesn't protect you from the toxicity. It just shows you exactly how you're being poisoned. Now you know why your nervous system screams in certain environments, why your body aches after conversations with specific people, why your energy gets drained by interactions that others find normal. You can't laugh at cruelty disguised as humor. Can't participate in intimacy that's actually manipulation. Can't pretend that dysfunction is just quirky personality traits. The cost of clarity is this: you can never return to the comfort of not knowing. You've stopped gaslighting yourself. You no longer blame yourself for feeling what others refuse to acknowledge. But something crystallizes in the aftermath of seeing too much. A space opens up, not the space of elevation, but of displacement. You find yourself existing in a kind of psychological exile, suspended between the world you've left behind and a place you haven't yet reached. Conversations become echo chambers. People move like holograms, present but somehow insubstantial. Their laughter reaches you through what feels like thick glass. Everything continues its familiar rhythm, but you're operating on a different frequency entirely. You didn't choose this separation. Clarity chose it for you. Your responses have been rewired. Your tolerance for illusion has been chemically altered. Something fundamental in your processing system has evolved beyond the collective baseline. And there's no manual for how to exist in this new configuration. You're not above anyone, not superior, not enlightened, just displaced. Occupying a psychological territory that most people will never visit, carrying perceptions that feel too heavy to share and too real to ignore. This displacement creates a specific kind of suffering. The ache of being awake in a sleeping world. The exhaustion of processing reality while others process performance. The weight of carrying clarity that has nowhere to land. Shi Heng understood this liminal space with rare precision. He wouldn't rush you toward integration or push you back toward comfort. He recognized this suspension as necessary, a psychological molting where the old self dies before the new one has fully formed. Here, in this strange suspension, something profound happens. The false self, the one that performed for acceptance, that contorted itself for belonging, begins to dissolve. Its frantic energy dissipates. Its desperate strategies lose their urgency. And in that dissolution, something else emerges. Not a better version of who you were, but something entirely different. A self that doesn't need external validation to exist. A presence that can sustain itself without the constant feedback of social approval. The silence that felt so threatening begins to reveal its gifts. In it, you hear your own voice. Not the voice that says what others want to hear, but the one that speaks from depths you'd forgotten existed. This space between worlds is where authentic selfhood is born, where you stop trying to fit and start learning to exist, where the question shifts from, how do I belong, to, how do I remain true to what I've seen? But this process of remaining true to your vision brings its own shock. There's a saturation point where your expanded awareness becomes a form of torment. You sit in conversations and simultaneously hear the desperation beneath laughter, the manipulation threaded through compliments, the fear driving every goal, every plan, every forced smile. Your nervous system processes multiple layers of reality at once, and the cognitive load becomes crushing. You walk through spaces filled with people who feel like ghosts. You speak, but your words land in a void. You listen, but truth never emerges from their mouths. You're surrounded by human forms engaged in elaborate pretenses, and the existential loneliness becomes so acute it manifests as physical nausea. Your body begins rejecting the artificial at a cellular level. The same way you might vomit poison, your system revolts against false intimacy, manufactured enthusiasm, performed connection. Something deep within you screams, "This is not how consciousness was designed to operate." Shi Heng recognized this threshold with brutal honesty. "When you fully awaken," he observed, "you will experience a kind of suffering that has no cure, not because you are damaged, but because you can no longer participate in collective delusion. And outside that delusion, everything becomes hyper-real. Colors too bright, voices too loud, interactions too obviously scripted. You can't unsee the mechanisms of avoidance operating in every exchange. Can't unfeel the electromagnetic fields of desperation surrounding most human contact. Part of you wants to retreat, to somehow unknow what you know, to return to the soft focus of ignorance, where smiles seemed genuine and small talk felt harmless. But that neurological pathway has been severed. The capacity for willful blindness has been chemically altered beyond repair. Here, in this razor-sharp awareness, something devastating crystallizes. You are no longer capable of pretending. Your system has been rewired to reject performance at a molecular level. Your body physically contracts when forced to participate in scripts that insult your intelligence. When you try to laugh at things that aren't funny, your throat closes. When you attempt to validate illusions, your voice disappears. When you consider shrinking back into acceptable behavior, your nervous system stages a revolt. You're not having a breakdown. You're experiencing what happens when consciousness can no longer tolerate unconsciousness. Your awareness has reached a critical mass, where participating in collective delusion creates actual physical distress. This isn't pathology. This is evolution. Your system has developed antibodies against simulation. What others call being difficult is actually intelligence protecting itself from contamination. The false self, the one that bent and performed and apologized for existing, is dying. And like any death, it's violent, messy, uncomfortable for everyone involved, but underneath the dismantling, something else stirs, something that doesn't need permission to exist, something that refuses to compromise its perception for social comfort. something that has been waiting to emerge from beneath years of conditioning and performance. But even this emergence carries its own weight. The pain remains, the isolation persists, but your relationship to both begins to transform. You stop fighting what you see, stop begging to unknow what you know, stop fantasizing about returning to ignorance. You begin walking forward with your eyes permanently open, and that acceptance changes everything. You cease trying to be palatable, stop attempting to diminish your presence so others feel less confronted by your clarity. Stop softening your voice to accommodate their comfort with delusion. You become something rare, quiet but not silent, present but not reactive, detached but not disconnected. Shi Heng understood this transformation with precision. You are not here to be comfortable, he recognized. You are here to be conscious. And consciousness, once fully awakened, becomes a responsibility. This responsibility is not what you imagined. It's not about teaching others or fixing the world. It's about maintaining your awareness, regardless of how others respond to it. About sustaining clarity in environments designed to erode it. About remaining present to truth even when truth is uncomfortable. You discover something unexpected. Your heightened perception becomes a form of stability. You can walk into chaotic spaces and remain grounded. Be surrounded by unconscious reactivity and choose stillness. Feel the pain radiating from others without absorbing it as your own. Your awareness has been refined into an instrument of discernment rather than suffering. Where once you were overwhelmed by what you saw, now you simply witness it. Where once you felt obligated to respond to every dysfunction, now you recognize that your non-participation is response enough. You carry something that has become precious. The capacity to see clearly without being destroyed by what you see, to remain awake without becoming bitter, to witness suffering without drowning in it. This is not enlightenment. This is something more practical, functional consciousness. The ability to navigate reality without requiring it to be different than it is. To exist authentically without needing others to validate that authenticity. Your presence begins operating like a tuning fork. Not announcing itself, not demanding attention, but vibrating at a frequency that reminds others that clarity is possible, that depth exists, that someone, somewhere, has chosen to remain awake. You've stopped trying to convert anyone to your way of seeing. Instead, you've become living proof that it's possible to see too much and not only survive, but emerge more solid than before, more grounded, more real. And in a world where most people are drowning in performance, that kind of presence becomes medicine. Not dramatic medicine, not miraculous intervention, just the quiet medicine of someone who has learned to exist without apology. But this medicine comes at a cost that few understand. The weight remains. The hypersensitivity to falseness hasn't diminished. The existential loneliness still surfaces in quiet moments. But your relationship to these experiences has undergone a fundamental shift. What once felt like affliction now operates as orientation. The burden that threatened to crush you has become the thing that steadies you. The isolation that felt like punishment now defines your psychological sovereignty. The clarity that separated you from others now anchors you to something more solid than social approval. While the world accelerates its pace of avoidance, you move with deliberate slowness. While others react from unconscious programming, you respond from conscious choice. While most flee their inner landscape, the moment it becomes uncomfortable, you've learned to inhabit yours completely. Shi Heng recognized this transformation as the moment you begin to carry yourself like someone who belongs to themselves. Not to others, not to external validation, not to the collective dream. To the deepest part of yourself that has finally been allowed to exist without compromise. You no longer seek confirmation of your perceptions. Your internal compass has been calibrated by direct experience rather than consensus reality. You don't need echo chambers to validate what you see. You don't need to speak every truth you recognize. Your presence communicates something deeper than words. You've become dangerous in the way that authenticity is always dangerous, not through aggression, but through your refusal to participate in collective self-deception. You walk into spaces and immediately sense the undercurrents of manipulation, fear, and avoidance operating beneath surface interactions. But nothing moves you from your center. Not because you've become numb, because you've become anchored. Your heightened perception has transformed from a source of suffering into something resembling a sanctuary, a place within yourself that remains stable regardless of external chaos. A psychological fortress built not from walls, but from the capacity to witness without being consumed. There's no pride in this evolution, only a quiet recognition that you've crossed a threshold most people spend their lives avoiding. And rather than seeking escape from this new territory, you've made it home. Even the loneliness has changed its character. Where once it felt like exile, now it feels like solitude. Where once it suggested something was wrong with you, now it confirms something is right. You've stopped confusing being alone with being lost. You're found, in the most honest way possible. You've chosen to remain present to reality even when reality is uncomfortable. To feel deeply even when feeling hurts. To see clearly even when clarity isolates. And this choice, this sustained commitment to consciousness regardless of cost, has transformed you into something rare in a world that runs from itself. But this rarity comes with its own recognition. You didn't choose this perception, didn't seek out hypersensitivity to deception, manipulation, and unconsciousness. It developed organically, painfully, without your permission, the way evolution always happens, through pressure, through necessity, through repeated exposure to what others refuse to acknowledge. And now you carry this awareness like genetic code. Not something you put on or take off, but something woven into your nervous system. Not glamorous, not mystical, just functionally, irreversibly real. But here's what has crystallized through the pain. This clarity, though it costs you comfort, belonging, and the luxury of ignorance, preserves something more valuable than any of those things. It preserves your soul. You are no longer susceptible to the psychological infections that colonize most minds. Cannot be seduced by empty validation. Cannot be distracted by hollow achievements. Cannot be trapped in performance cycles that drain authentic vitality. Cannot be manipulated by people who mistake your depth for availability. Because you see. And seeing protects you from the unconscious agreements that destroy most people slowly, imperceptibly. You see how they run from their own interior landscape, how they project unprocessed pain onto every relationship, how they transform intimacy into a battlefield of unmet childhood needs, how they mistake reactivity for passion, avoidance for peace, performance for connection. And instead of being horrified by this recognition, you've learned to let your awareness expand around it, to breathe with the discomfort rather than contract against it. To remain grounded in your own center while witnessing the chaos of unconscious living. Seeing too much hasn't destroyed you. It's refined you into something precise, intentional, untouchable in the ways that matter most. This isn't isolation, it's discernment. You don't belong everywhere because you're not meant to. You're not for the crowds that gather around illusion. You're for the rare encounters with people who value truth over comfort. For the honest conversations that most avoid, for the depth that terrifies surface dwellers. Shi Heng understood this final recognition. You are not broken by what you see. You are forged by it, shaped into something the world needs but doesn't know how to ask for. You've become a holder of clarity in a world addicted to confusion, not someone who preaches or teaches or forces awareness on others, someone who simply maintains it within themselves. Who remembers what it means to feel fully, see accurately, and choose conscious response over unconscious reaction. Your presence operates as a silent reminder that depth is possible, that authenticity exists, that someone, somewhere, has chosen to remain awake despite the cost. And in a civilization that has largely forgotten what consciousness looks like when it's not performing, Your quiet awareness becomes a form of cultural preservation. You're not just carrying personal clarity. You're holding space for the possibility that others might one day choose to see clearly too. This is not a burden you've been cursed with. It's a capacity you've been prepared for. The weight was always meant to become strength. The isolation was always meant to become sovereignty. The clarity was always meant to become service. If this resonates with something inside you, subscribe to the channel. This journey is just beginning.